everyone. Happy Monday and welcome to the Girls in Property podcast. I hope you're all having a fabulous Monday so far, had some fun at the weekend. I'm ready to really hit it this week. It's going to be a good week for everyone. I can feel it. So today on the podcast, I have somebody very special I'd like you to introduce you to, who is Adriana Cafasso. Have I pronounced that right?
You have, that's perfect. Hello.
Yay! How are you, Adriana? You well?
Yes, I'm really, really well, thank you. Busy, but all is good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. As I was saying to you just before I came on the podcast, and I've said it before and I'll say it again because I think it's so important to say, which is I'm so excited about the women who are currently coming on this podcast. I think that it's such a strong network that is being created in a community for the Girls in Property podcast and events and everything. And I'm just so thrilled to get you on because you're doing such amazing things, which of course you're gonna introduce yourself. I won't steal your thunder for you, but also really doing something really cool up in the north as well. And what I love is the fact that I can get people on who are, for example, in the south, the Midlands and the north, just to really give a really good scope as to what's actually happening and the differences logistically and geographically, really. So I won't steal your thunder. Would you like to please, first of all, introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do in the property world, maybe a bit about what you do in your free time, and then we can start a conversation from there.
Yeah, of course. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on. I love the pod, and exactly like you said, such a cool space. There's so many amazing women now, especially that you're getting on and that you meet through the space. So yeah, appreciate being one of them that's been chosen to be on here. But yeah, so I'm Adriana, and I develop and convert HMOs in the northeast of England, which is basically right at the top of the country. I essentially specialise in finding, renovating, project management, and then obviously the back end rentals as well. So it's essentially a full kind of end to end service that I offer. I invest myself, I invest for my clients. And yeah, that's basically what I've been doing for the last couple of years, really. So at the minute, I am running 7 development sites, which are all based off either flat conversions or rundown properties or HMO conversions. And yeah, so that probably takes up 99% of my life, but I love it. And then in terms of what I like to do outside of that, I mean, I think a lot of the property networking now has taken over my social life because you are just surrounded by so many amazing people all the time. And I would rather go there and, meet with the likes of my friends and the people in that network. So yeah, that is, I guess, spare time. But also I like to train, I like to take care of myself, things like that. But yeah, work is kind of the full focus at the minute.
Yeah, well, I suppose when you're starting out a business, I mean, how long have you been doing it for now?
So 2.5 years
Yeah,
I've been
and that's
doing
the
the
thing, it's
business
similar
for
to
now. So
me.
it's
And
just been
when
building out since then, really.
absolutely, and when you are in sort of that stage, as I am, work does become your life, doesn't it? Because you're working so hard to get it up and running, to get it going, to get clients on board, to get more clients, and you almost can see the success of it. And I don't know how you feel about this, but when I see the success of things, it just makes me want to keep going. I go, oh, this is working, let's keep going, rather than, oh, this is working, I'm doing well, let's pull back. It almost supercharges you. Do you feel that?
100%. Yeah, exactly. Like the thing is, what it's very easy to sort of be in that instant gratification mindset of, oh, this has gone well, made this money, let's go celebrate, go take a break, take a holiday. But the thing is, if the industry that you're in, and particularly when you're working for yourself, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and and if I'm doing it and I know it's going well, and it's not just a case of, I think especially the way that my business is built out, it's not just a case of, okay, we know we find something for ourselves or we find something for a client, that's that, move on. I've then got the next sort of 6 to 9 months working with that same client or working with myself to actually move through to the development. So one good thing happening, the win, then triggers to so much more work as well. And exactly like you said, the more that you do it, the more that you get the wins, the more that you're like, yeah, this is working. And I think businesses in the early years are when they're the most fragile. So you have to nurture it. You have to be there. I've seen it myself with my parents. You have to give it everything. But essentially, my business now has become I don't have children, but that is kind of what I relate it to. It is absolutely everything that I think about, everything that I push towards, everything that I do. And it has become that obsession, passion element in my life for sure.
I love this. What you just said, I have so many questions and things to talk to you about. Absolutely. But just before I do, what we usually do at the beginning of every podcast is we usually discuss something that we're celebrating at the moment as well. So just before we kind of go into the nitty gritty of the HMO conversions and speaking about them, do you want to say something that you are celebrating either in your personal or professional life at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go professional, because that then builds out the personal life that you want, I guess. Two things really that are big celebrations at the minute. One is my next purchase is going through, so I should have the keys to that in about 4 weeks, which is going to be a mixed use HMO. So that's really cool. Project of my own. And then the other one, of course, is partnering with Savoys, where we are essentially just massively expanding, being able to, bring lots more investors to the north and build out that way. So yeah, it's feeling really cool to sort of be at that stage where you are connecting and working with such huge and successful people as well, but warranted off, the merit and the business that I actually bring to the table as well.
I love that. And because you mentioned it now, I was going to touch on it later because obviously I know about your collaboration with Savoys. But since you mentioned it now, let's just discuss that first of all. So I've mentioned before on the podcast, I love the Savoys Property Group, which is run by Malkit, Sanjay and Lauren. And for me, what I spoke about actually on a previous podcast, the one actually that went out 2 weeks prior to your one going out with Courts, Courtney Bryan, is the fact that Savoys really are fantastic at really supporting women in the property industry, which I really love. And of course, Lauren is a massive advocate for that, who works in the construction world for Savoys. And obviously we know these sort of Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 events as they were, and they're fantastic. And they usually I know for a fact that they really try hard to make sure that it's a 50-50 gender split at these events, or quite frankly, parties, as I call them, networking parties, and they're absolutely brilliant. So what is your collaboration with Savoys? Why did you choose Savoys, and what are you hoping to collaborate with them on?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, exactly as you just said, they are fantastic in business, but also fantastic people as well, and particularly advocates for making sure that there is an equal space there as well. So yeah, the collaboration, how it kind of happened was the same way most businesses done. You start out, we've known each other now for maybe about 6, 7, 8 months kind of thing. They've seen me on socials. I've obviously seen those guys. We've been speaking back and forth, obviously went to their events, and we then started to kind of get to know each other more and more, realised there was a lot of synergy in terms of our business models. So what they do down in the south of HMO, commercial resi conversions, where they offer the kind of full package to their clients and also in their own portfolio, is the same business model that I have in the north. So synergy there already. My team's already established and set up. For those guys, it's a case of, okay, now they obviously want to expand. How can they do that? It's finding someone that what we both bring to the table is exactly what we're both looking for. I'm expanding, they're expanding, the base is already set up, there's already that established base. I also already work with their broker, which is CPC Finance, who again are absolutely fantastic. So there was already that synergy there as well, that, we're already using the same firm. Again, the banks are already familiar with my projects because we've put the same kind of deals through. So everything actually really lined up perfectly. We went through the numbers and things like that and realised, it's a really good opportunity for their clients to be able to invest. And the north and the south have got two different benefits. In the south, you do have that massive capital appreciation that you can leverage off. In the north, yes, you do have capital appreciation, but also in terms of what you can actually achieve on a return basis, it is actually higher, because you buy less, you spend less money going in, and then you do still get that high valuation on the back end, so you're able to kind of realise that capital. So yeah, massive opportunity to basically for us both to expand the business. And I think partnering with someone, you know, like those guys who've got such big respect for and admiration, really, it's all very exciting. So essentially what we've done is, obviously with bridging companies, there's X amount that lenders want to lend in terms of development finance and loans under sort of £150,000. So in the north, quite often it's been for my clients, you know, you buy it, you can buy on a bridge, but then the development, ideally you're going to need to fund it cash. Now, again, that can stop some people having access to that depending on how much capital you've got, or stop you growing quite as quickly. So what we've essentially done is based on the back of obviously the Savoys, their experience, my track record with the valuations. The banks have essentially agreed that they are going to loan on the purchase and the development, which means you can essentially get into these HMO conversions for less capital outlay on the front end. We are going to be kind of touching base next week with everyone and just running through exactly how it looks. But it is really exciting. What it also means as well is, because essentially I offer the full package from sourcing, project management to actually rentals as well. And alongside, that's exactly how Savoys have done it. Clients can essentially get in without having, on the commercial valuation aspect of it, without actually having to have had landlord experience previously. Now, for some people, that's been a massive barrier to entry. You might have all this capital and think, oh my God, I can do anything with this money, but that's not always it. The banks need to know that, okay, well, where's that money going? But who's responsible for making sure that money is going to be spent the right way, i.e. the renovations are going to be HMO compliant. You can actually do the HMO. You understand how to manage a HMO. But because everything's leveraged off the back of our knowledge and our experience and our teams, clients can then access that as the first investment project. So yeah, all very exciting. There's lots to go into there, but essentially we've just collided on our models to then bring it to more people.
Brilliant. I love that. And you know what? That actually ties in really beautifully with something that I'm celebrating over this period as well, which is connections. That is what I'm celebrating. So it's very similar to yours and Savoy's. So as we grow our businesses, and you know, I feel like we're speaking a very similar language here. We build our network, we build our brand awareness, we get ourselves out there. Social media, I think, is a fantastic platform if used in the correct way to inspire and to be. I always say that it's not just about consuming social media. I think if you're just a consumer of social media, it's quite dangerous. I think if you're proactive and you're a producer in social media, it's used in a completely different way, to be really proactive and to understand why you're using it in a specific way. And so many connections have been formed for me through that. Of course, the podcast with all the girls and guys that I'm meeting through the podcast as well has just exploded. I was saying to my partner the other day, and we're going to touch on more about this as we spoke about off the podcast just slightly later on. But of course, when you go to expand and you go to grow, there's a lot that comes with that in regards to trying to keep up with it. But I was saying to him the other day, like, I'm so grateful for how everything is going and how everything is developing. Like, my DMs literally just blow up for Girls in Property, for my personal page. It's really hard, quite frankly, to keep up. Really hard to keep up, and it almost becomes a full-time job, because I don't know about you, but I can respond to DMs that I receive in a morning and it's already like midday, and I've just been responding to DMs and I'm like, oh, okay, that took up like 2 hours. So I'm very grateful, and the connections I'm making are amazing. The people I'm speaking to are amazing. The doors now that are opening in regards to investment coming through, you know, where people are now coming to me and saying, right, I want to invest, this is what I've got. And it's all through really putting yourself out there, you know, being credible, showing what you can do, showing that you're authentic and real and genuine. Because I always say that you always want to work with people that you see, like, and trust, or know, like, and trust. And if they see you and they know you and they like you, that's half of it. So I'm going to celebrate, very similar to you, this idea of connections and connecting with people on all aspects. And I'm really looking forward to meeting quite a few of them at the retreat as well. So connections is good, and I'd like to celebrate that. So yes, love it.
I completely agree, exactly like you said. Yeah,
Absolutely.
you are nothing without a network, really.
Well, I think that's what it is, isn't it? Like, property is a people business. We've said
Mm.
it before and we'll say it again till we're blue in the face. It really is.
Yeah,
Like, people who don't realize that and who hide away or sit behind a computer analyzing deal after deal after deal and not going networking and not getting themselves out there and not putting themselves out there on social media, I think they're really hindering themselves. I truly believe that. I think the more you put yourself out there and just
yeah,
step away from your laptop and step into the light, as I say, I think it will transform your life, and put yourself out there on the chopping block, which we'll speak about actually, as well, because I'd like to get your opinion about it, but day after day and going from there. So that I stay on track, Adriana, because otherwise I'll go off on a complete tangent with you because there's so much I want to speak about. I want to do things in quite a
yeah, we
systematic
could.
order if I can. We literally could. We could talk about lots of
Mm.
different things, but let's do everything in a systematic order and hopefully we'll get everything tied in by the end of the pod.
Yes.
So first of all, for people listening to this who don't really understand the concept of a HMO conversion or even what a HMO, quite frankly, is, because we have all different levels of listeners, could you please explain the
Mm-hmm.
process that if someone was to come to you and say, okay, I've got X amount, first of all, how much money are they likely going to need? And also, what is the process
Mm-hmm.
of going from the beginning to the end of a HMO conversion?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to start out, I will go into what exactly a HMO is, and then I'll kind of work backwards because I think you need to see the end picture. So essentially, a HMO is what it is known for as house of multiple occupancy, which essentially means, you're taking a property and you are essentially going to rent that out on a room by room basis. Now, typically that's on sort of an AST tenancy, but the tenancy agreement is for one tenant to a room. Now, this can range in various sizes. You might have a mini-mo, which is, your sort of 3 to 4 tenants living together. And then you can go to the sort of larger end HMOs, 5, 6, 7, 8, and above. And each one comes with their own parameters and their own regulations. But essentially, what it does for a landlord is it gives you the ability to push up your monthly rental income. So, for example, on a normal buy-to-let, this varies across the country, but it's on average a few £100s a month. Two to three, £400 a month. Whereas on a HMO property, you can see upwards of £1,000 a month, talking about 6-bed and upwards. So there's really a massive ability to kind of increase what you can make a month, but also it's essentially providing your tenants with the ability to live somewhere, where they aren't having to pay as much for the rent because they're not having to foot everything themselves. And traditionally, we wrap the bills up as a full package. So as a young professional, okay, my rent's £600 a month, but that's it. I don't have to think about another thing. That's done. So it works both ways, and it's got a lot of benefits. And particularly the way that we run our HMOs is that we renovate everything, so it means that everything goes to a really high standard. So essentially now the HMO market has had a massive shift over the sort of last maybe 10, 15 years, where the target is professional. You are looking to create them high-end homes for young working professionals to want to live in, where they can all live communally, and it's kind of got that co-living approach to it now, as opposed to traditionally a HMO, which might have been initially frowned upon and it's providing that lower standard of accommodation. But yeah, that is essentially what a HMO is. Now, where and what I do is I convert HMOs. We do some where we buy existing and then realise the value through different ways. But traditionally, my main method has been finding residential properties or sort of mixed use and then converting them into high-end all ensuite HMOs. So the general kind of process to getting involved in something like that is, if we start from the beginning, is you actually need to find and assess a property that's going to work for it. So quite often clients will come to me because there's a lot that goes into actually finding these kind of properties. Typically, depending, let's say we're going for an average of 6-bed HMO, you're probably looking at around the 80k mark needed to get into it. It can vary, it can change, sort of 80 to 100, potentially lower if we're leveraging off loans and things like that. But yeah, that will give us an average of what you need to kind of get into something like this. So essentially, how that works is we find a residential property, we run the checks on that property, i.e., can we fit 6 beds and ensuite or above into this property with space standards that we need to follow and things like that. You've then got to, assess the area, because there's certain areas that we can HMO and there's certain ones that we can't. There's certain, council might put in Article 4 direction and things like that into the area. Where that's there, we can't just go and find a normal resi property and turn it into. So again, that's where the expertise and the knowledge of the area comes in. We would then take that through, we would convert it. More often than not, we go back to brick, because there's a lot of different regulations that go into a HMO as opposed to what we'd put in a normal residential property. Different fire alarm systems, different fire boarding, regulations, space standards, and all those kind of things, really. What we particularly do in ours is we future-proof all of the investments. So not every single HMO property does actually need, your top spec fire alarm system. But as a standard, we will put that into the property. And yes, you might spend a little bit more on the front end, but then that's future-proof. Nobody can ever come back and request otherwise. And also, you've got that peace of mind knowing you've done everything you can to protect the tenants. So little things like that. And of course, the type of market you're going for depends on what you put into the property. So again, something that I'll always discuss with my client, this market is great for professional tenants. So we need to do the extra little things in this property to then get maximum rents. And you essentially just work through to then creating this house, working with building control, because they are a massive part of it. They need to sign off on everything, working with licensing to make sure they're actually happy with the property and the way that it flows, to then, ensure we get all our certificates and we can actually then rent that out as a HMO on the back end. So that's kind of a brief overview of what it would look like in terms of to create the HMO properties that we do at scale.
Yeah, perfect. Love that. And a couple of questions then for you about this. So my first question is there may be some people sat there listening thinking, well, let's go in order, because I was thinking of 3 questions. So the first thing they might be thinking to themselves is, oh, this sounds like a really good cash flowing business. I'm going to go with this idea as opposed to a standard buy to let. However, what you just touched on is that there are a lot more hurdles to actually jump over for a HMO, and a lot more caveats that they have to do in regards to it than just simply getting a buy to let and cash flowing from that. So can you talk about the differences and the extra hurdles that people do actually have to jump over, and it not seem just an easy thing to do? Because I think it's important to see all aspects of this.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same with everything, where you are getting that benefit of higher cash flow, or where you are making the bigger wins in terms of the valuations. Of course, there's going to be more hurdles to jump through. It starts on the aspect of actually building out the project and creating that home. Exactly as I said before, there's so many regulations you need to go through. You couldn't just find a house, stick people in the rooms really, and then rent it out. It wouldn't work. Whereas, so that's something that needs to be factored on the front end. The second thing is, so once you've actually done that renovation, it's really important that you actually know, who do you need to get the license from? Who do you need to speak to? Can you get a license? Because essentially, if you were to just get a house, my house has got 6 beds, I'm going to rent it out to 6 people, stick it on spare room, don't even need a management company. Well, if you don't have a license, it's about a £20,000 fine that you can get, and then you can lose the ability to ever have a license again, which, you go cheap first to think you can just do it, you'll pay 100 times. So yeah, that's really important. Yeah, making sure you've got your license in. And also, when you are actually going for the license, they make sure that, you are a fit and proper person to manage that property. And what also comes into that is not just, are you competent? Are you XYZ? It's actually, do you understand the level of responsibility you need to have over these tenants? Because as landlords you have a level of responsibility whether or not your tenant's over 18 or not. So you need to make sure that property is compliant, meaning that you have all your electric certs, you have your license in place, you get that renewed every 5 years, all your measurements are up to date, the property, the license is displayed in the property, you've got a point of call, you've got out of hours contact, there's so many things that you need to do, which again is why the actual management side of a HMO is why you essentially are paying more. You might pay 10% on normal buy to let, but traditionally on a HMO, you're probably looking more about the 12% of the gross income is taken off. So yes, you generate more income from a HMO, but you also have more risk and you do have more expenses. You're footing the bills for a full house. 6-bed house, tenants that have got bills included, they are going to use a lot of energy, and you are going to have those costs to consider, and you are going to have higher management costs and more damages and things like that. So again, you've got to consider every point of the way, but that doesn't mean it's not a profitable investment. It absolutely is. But you absolutely need to make sure that from day one, you know what you're doing, you know the regulations that you need to meet, the people that you need to have in place, the right brokers and lenders to ensure that your property is valued the way it actually needs to be, the right management company, because more often than not, management companies won't specialise in HMO management because of the sheer workload. So it's really, really important that you don't just kind of walk in and figure it out along the way, because it will cost. Get the training, or get around the right people, or work with people who have done it to then learn what you need to do. I hope that covers everything without getting into it too much, or I can go into it in more detail if you want.
No, it was absolutely perfect. And what you stipulated is basically get the knowledge, get the experience. Like for me, I obviously go around and I see a lot of student HMOs because we take them over, and we see them and they're so tired and run down. And I look at even the fire doors, and I'm like, this is not a legal fire door. I'm like, if the council came over, you would be in so much trouble. It's literally wild what is happening. And it's a tricky one for me, because we are landlords, like me and you are landlords, but then there are other landlords, and we care, obviously. There are other landlords who just don't care, and they're the properties that we tend to take over, the landlords that don't care. And it's fascinating when you go around and you see these properties and you're like, my God, like this needs to be 10 times better. And then you'd say to them, right, to bring it up to standards, if you're going to do it on, say, a rent HMO, you're like, right, these things doing, these doors need changing, this thing's doing. And they're like, right, it's about $5,000 to change all of this. And they're like, oh no, I'm not going to pay that. And you're like, well, you're not compliant. You're not going to, your license will not get renewed. So, and they don't really quite understand it.
Yeah.
And they just sort of buy, I feel like some landlords just buy these HMOs and go, yeah, that'll do. And it's like, no, you don't actually understand it. So my advice would be is, if you are thinking about doing a HMO conversion, it's a fantastic model to do. Get expertise and advice from someone like Adriana to help you on maybe your first one, something like that. Absolutely. But also look at your council specifically and the compliance rules for that council. And the reason I say that to you is because councils vary between council to council. Like in my area, for example, Bournemouth, what's compliant for Bournemouth for a HMO is completely different to what's compliant in Southampton, which is 40 minutes down the road. So you've really got to understand that and to read the documentation. Yes, it's boring. Yes, there's a lot of words, but my God, you need to understand, what is the room size in your area? How much cupboard space is needed? What is the fire regulation? What's needed in your area is what I'm trying to say. And you need to understand that and not rely on someone else to give you that knowledge who's not in your area. It's really important.
Yeah, really, really important, because there is the standard. You can go on and you can look at, the minimum size of a bedroom needs to be 6.5 plus a bathroom. And sometimes there is no real size standard that you need on an ensuite, for example. But councils can then implement that, or you will need to know what actually is going to work for the tenant. For example, if there's nothing that says your bathroom, your ensuite can be as small as you want it, well, you might think, I can get that room within the space size and put a really tiny ensuite in there. But if it's tiny, if it's unusable, that's going to then impact so many different aspects and different things. And again, licensing, it can impact that. So yeah, exactly like you said, be familiar with the councils and exactly what your area requires as well, which is where I think working with local people is so important. So for example, your architects, I've had it before where people have tried to recommend using their own architects, and you have to go with that, but it is cost tenfold, because you've said you can do one thing and that all goes through, and it turns out it's the opposite. So yeah, working with people in your area, and even if it does cost a little bit more, it's always worth it, I think, if someone comes recommended.
Absolute knowledge is power, isn't it? Absolutely, in that area. So this actually leads me on to my second question, which is, I'm of course down in the south. So typically down south in our area, not always, but we're just talking on a typical basis here. In order to get into a HMO conversion, let's call it a 3-bed Victorian house, to turn it into a 6 to 7 bed, something like that. Typically you need more than the north. We're looking 200,000 plus just to get in and then just kind of do everything from there. And when you originally spoke, you said to actually get started, you need about, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but about 80 to 90,000 to start. So clearly,
about 80 to 100 we'll get you in.
So it's double. It's literally double. So my question is do you have a lot? So here's my question. People will know that I always say to people, invest in your area that you know really well, or up to about an hour from it, because at least then if something is happening to your property, you can drive to it, you can see it with your own eyes, you can keep an eye on it, and that type of thing. However, do you actually have this situation where people are in the south and say, look, it's too expensive to buy in the south, I've got 100k, I haven't got, let's call it 200 for now, because the south is so expensive? Do they then come up to the north and put their trust in you that you know the area and that you keep them updated? How does it work?
Yes, exactly that. So a lot of my clients are remote investors. They don't live close to the site. But yeah, they put in their trust in me, essentially, to be able to deliver on that project. Now, absolutely, I hear what you say is in don't live an hour away from your site. For me, I can't live an hour away from my sites because I'm the one that's responsible for going to that site every day, for checking in, for checking on the timescales, managing the build and things like that. Whereas for my client, because I offer the service of sourcing, project management, and then rentals as well, they don't need to be here. And if they don't have the same level of knowledge and experience of me, I think that slightly counteracts it. So I think if you were, you're sitting in London, you wanted to go and invest in the north, but you're planning on doing it all yourself, it's not really going to work. And yes, I would stick to within the 1 hour rule, because at least you are close, because things are going to come up, things are going to happen where you have to drop everything and go to site. But where that my clients are in contract with myself, that I'm responsible for that, and I'm providing them detailed weekly updates of what's going on site, where we're at on the job, I'm liaising with building regs, I'm liaising with licensing, then it makes sense. And because there is that proven track record of, yes, I understand HMOs, I understand conversions and all the things that we do need to meet, then I would say, and imagine a lot of my clients as well, that counteracts the need to be so close. It's more about having someone that you know, like, and trust to then be close and to then deliver on that service.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of saying it, because I know that I have said some previous episodes where I've said invest in your area, but that's if you're going to be doing it yourself. If you're working with somebody in that particular area that you're in, for example, which area in the north are you actually located in, just so that we know?
So I'm in Newcastle, but I cover most area. Well, I cover every area of the northeast that is worth covering for my strategy.
Okay, perfect. And do you have therefore a team in place who is it like a one-stop shop? How does it work for people?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially my team consists of myself and, others in the team that are actually sourcing the projects and finding them. My architect, who's always going to check over the project and, make sure that works, that stacks up. We'll do the floor plans. We'll get our certificate of lawfulness if we need to. So myself sourcing it, then I've got the external team, which is the solicitors who are able to get things done quickly, which is the architects who can check the viability of a deal, and of course the brokers, which is CPC, who can then actually provide the lending for that project, realising it as a commercial HMO asset. And then from there, I have my build team. I've got a couple of different teams, and we just put the trades in, and then myself, who does the project management side of things as well. And then from there, we will again keep liaising with all the people we need to. We know the valuers, and we know the lenders, and we know the councils and things like that. So all of that is again dealt with in-house. And then again, when it comes to the rental side of it, that has been partnered with a long-established company who is now going to be in-house as well. So it is essentially the full one-stop shop, as you say.
Yeah, amazing. And my final question in regards to just this section about HMO conversions is, let's say that someone is sat there listening to this podcast today and they're thinking about getting into HMO conversions. What would you say from your experience now and from what you've seen, should people look out for when they're starting out in regards to pitfalls or things where they need to be aware of it, or risks or things that could go wrong with this, so that they know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what is really important is having the right team around you. I've been very fortunate with the way that I've done mine. For example, the likes of the brokers and the lenders that you're using, that you ensure that they can realise the valuation on a HMO, because what you're doing essentially is, for example, when you go into a commercial valuation, your aim is to pump up the valuation of that property so it is higher than a bricks and mortar valuation. So if you don't have a broker on side and lenders that appreciate that and can understand that, because it is a niche and a specialist route, that can come back badly. I've had people ring me up before, not my clients, and said, "Oh, I've done a HMO and I've come back with an ill valuation." And yeah, but you're using a high street lender. The high street lender is going to do that because they don't specialize in that, and that's fine. But it's exactly people who understand it. So working with the right people, understanding your area. Just because a house is large and cheap doesn't mean it's a good HMO. You need to make sure that you are in that high demand where you can push that demand to get it out. Yeah, I think those are really crucial parts. And knowing who you're working with. So, for example, when clients come on board to work with myself, they always see straight away, these are the valuations that we've had, these are the prices that we've purchased at, these are the comparables, come and see our sites. Actually have a look at what we're doing through socials and things like that. You can see that I'm actively always on a job, I'm always on a site, and you can see the sites that start, then you can follow them through that journey as well. So I think really important that you are working with the right people, particularly starting out. Exactly the same things that we said before. Your connections, they are essential, really. And yeah, I guess just having a general knowledge of what numbers you can expect and what the different numbers mean, and making sure that your financial situation is going to be able to support what you need to do, which I guess is where, and speaking with the broker at the start of a project as opposed to only when you need a refinance, are crucial.
Do you know, you've just touched on something there. I'm going to say two more things about this. I know I said that I'll move on from this, but I've just got two things based on what you just said. So the first one is when I mentor people, it's an excellent example what you just said. I always get them to speak to the broker before they begin. And I always say, right, I'm going to put you in touch with my broker. And they always say to me, yeah, but we haven't started yet. Yeah, but we don't have a project yet. So we don't need to talk to him. And I'm like, no, it's the wrong order. You need to talk to the broker now. You need to understand what you're working with before you go and try and find the property, before you begin and buy the property and then realize halfway through what's actually happening with it. And a lot of people almost don't realize that. And then once they've spoken to the broker, they're like, oh, actually, there's different ways of doing this. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. So you just touched on the fact of speak to the broker from the beginning. So I'm just going to reiterate that point to people. Get information, get knowledge, get good brokers, get lots of different creative ways of trying to finance projects is the first thing. And then I promise this is my last question on this particular subject, which is how are you finding things at the moment with obviously the changes in mortgage rates and things, particularly when it comes to the commercial valuations and lenders? Has that affected anything?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm putting a lot of projects through. Ultimately, luckily with the HMO aspect side of things, because you are getting that higher cash flow, there is more of a profit buffer margin that you can work with. The way that I've been doing it, I mean, realistically, I've been pumping HMOs through, and it's been a lot of my time has been where interest rates have been high. So for us, where we are ensuring that that property is getting that high cash flow, it's not necessarily been an issue. It's not been a problem. Yes, it's down to each of the individual, but I think ultimately where you can make your deal stack and stack very well in an area where you've got high interest rates, high mortgage rates, then that's more future proof. It's bulletproof. You know what I mean? If you're already clutching at straws where you're on a low interest rate and your deal comfortably works, then as soon as that shoots up, you're in trouble. Whereas if you go in where it's high, when it comes back down, it's going to be even better. But because of the way that our deals and the prices that we're purchasing at, the valuations that we're getting, there is that massive ability to pull out capital, go again, still get a really nice profit every month off of the property. So I wouldn't say it's particularly slowed things down. I think now is to be honest, it's a great time to buy, and it also gives you the ability to, I don't know how much the line's useful anymore, but because of rates and changes, you need to then get money off the purchase price. But yeah, I do think things are on the route to steadying out anyway and coming down.
I always say two things with this. So I always say you make money when you buy, definitely. So always try and get it below the market value as best you can, because then that is going to caveat to work against the mortgage situation. So that's the first thing I say to people. Mm-hmm. And the second thing I always say to people is just stress test it. So if you're worried about the whole mortgage situation, as long as you stress test it, then you can't go wrong. You know, always go slightly above. And if the deal still works slightly above what it currently is, then go for it. If it doesn't work when you're stress testing, maybe think about it, because that could obviously change when it comes to the end of the fixed term. We don't have a crystal ball. Do you know, I don't know if you get this. People ask me this all the time. And I find it funny that they ask me, because I'm, of course, not a broker. I'm not a financial advisor. They're like, say to me, Athena, what do you think is going to happen to the mortgage rates? And I'm like, why would I know? I'm also in the same shoes as everybody else, where I'm saying to the broker, you know, do you know? And they look at me like, Athena, no, I don't know. Like, what do you want me to say? And I'm going
No one knows. That's the thing. You have to just keep going.
And I'm going through a personal remortgage at the moment on my residential property, which actually is something that's happened this week. And it went up significantly on my residential property. We were at 1.64 and we've just gone up to 5.58. So it's a lot.
Really?
Yeah, on my residential.
Oh, wow, that is a lot. That is a lot.
On my residential. And the reason, I'm always really transparent and open and honest. The reason was, I'm going a bit off topic here, but it's because we're talking about mortgage rates. What happened to us was, because of the situation we're in, where we left our full-time jobs, me and my partner, and so we've now gone down this road of self-employment, we got stuck because effectively I was talking to my broker and he's like, really, you can't remortgage, because if you remortgage, you're going to have it all opened up with pay slips, which you don't have, and you don't have enough to actually warrant the property. So you have to do a product transfer instead. And the issue was, by doing the product transfer, which, by the way, I did not realize this, and this is my fault. Even on a product transfer, not a remortgage, a transfer, there is still the fee to pay, the product fee to pay, which was $999. And I was like, are you kidding me that they're going to add $1,000 onto the mortgage to do a product transfer? I'm deviating here, but I was very upset. So what I think people is, you know, we decide to make these choices in life and we decide to go and be self-employed and start our own businesses. But there is reality behind that as well of, okay, now we're in a position where we've just had to basically, we've effectively been cornered, if you like, the fact that we've had to do this. Now, I'm blessed that I own a home. I'm blessed that I'm on the ladder. I'm blessed in so many ways, and I'm not taking anything away from that. So please don't hear this and think of me as, listen to her when she's got a property. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there is the reality behind it of, I just had to remortgage. And that's quite a stressful situation to go through when your bills go up significantly per month as a result of the interest rates. So that is something happening at this moment, which I'm sure for a lot of people are going through that as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I can imagine. I think that is the thing of nothing, whatever we're doing, nothing ever comes plain sailing. So, you know, you've taken the decision to go self-employed, to go and work for yourself. Now, of course, that's got so many amazing benefits, but I just think there's always something, and it keeps you grounded, it keeps you humble, and it prepares you so that you know, next time you need to do it, you need to be in a position where you have got X, Y, and Z in place, and be prepared for that worst case scenario. And you've got through this now, and you've made it work. So in a sense, it does just teach you a lesson, and because you keep going from it, nothing is ever just going to be sunshine and roses. I always say, prepare kind of for, that's the thing. You've got to be prepared for it. So, I mean, I'm doing a refinance, but we bought it cash. We're refinancing at the minute. It's a fleet mortgage. I got the first few terms through. Do you know what? it was actually quite good because we pretty much nailed where we were at, which we've been really lucky with. But of course, you've got all your different figures that you've got to think about as well, and make sure that everything's factored in terms of, your rate, fees, and things like that, and your actual, yeah. So there's so many things to think about. I'm going off on a tangent, but
there's lots to think about.
That is the risk that you take. Yeah, that's the risk that you take when you do kind of go down your own route, and it's that, okay, well, what's the reward being worth versus the losses? And as long as overall the rewards outweigh the losses, I think it's fine. It's all part of the journey.
Oh, honestly, if someone would have said to me, Athena, this is what's going to happen to you, I would still go for it 100%. The rewards, the rewards of having your own business outweigh it, absolutely. But it's funny because people did say to me a really hilarious thing. They're like, well, why didn't you originally, instead of going onto a 2-year fix, go onto a 5-year fix when you knew this was coming? And I'm like, first of all, I didn't really know that this was coming, and second of all, I didn't know what the rates were going to do. Like, how was I supposed to know? It's a silly question. I'm like, how was I supposed to know? And do you know what? You just have to. I'm a big believer in the universe. The universe brings you things for a reason, and this is one of those where it's problem solving. You're like, this is what's happening. This is what we've decided to do, and this is how we're going to overcome it, and this is how we're going to move forward. So it's just life and problem solving. So absolutely. I've got a different question to ask you, which is, I've seen recently on social media, and I speak a lot about social media because I think it's really important to have talks about. How do you feel about this? Because I'd be really interested to hear your opinion. As you grow and you put yourself out there on social media more and more and more, I feel like you almost therefore put yourself on a chopping block constantly because you're putting yourself out there. And as you grow, I feel like there are people who are really going to lift you, and there are people who are going to question you, or people who are not. And I saw, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but it's just because I think it's a really interesting conversation to have, is I was looking, of course, at your social media, which is flying. Like, you're doing absolutely amazing. I love your content. I love the way you do it. I find it really inspiring. I really, really do. I love it. But ever so often I'll read some of your comments and I can see the majority of them are fantastic, amazing, all of this. And ever so often I'll see somebody who either leaves a negative comment or they leave a comment questioning you, even as a young person, a young woman, those types of things. Like, how do you deal with that from a mental health standpoint for yourself?
I'll be honest. I just tend not to look at them. I see them, and more often than not, it will be the same for everybody. At the end of the day, people are far more bothered about what the world thinks of them than almost saying what they think when they are stand-up members of society. So 9 times out of 10, if I'm getting these comments, it's someone who's private, who's got a couple of followers, maybe don't even have a picture, got some weird, stupid name, and they're posting them in. And do you know what? They weren't in my life before, they're not about to be in now. I'm not desperate to bring in new people that I don't feel the same merit from. At the end of the day, we do what we do because we love what we do. I know what I do. I've got a proven track record of what I do. So Barry from Scotland telling me that something's crap, it really doesn't affect my life when I've got, 100,000 worth of developments kind of going on. And I think that's the biggest thing what people have got to remember. When it first started, when my social media kind of started to blow up, it was around Christmas time. And I started to read the comments and I was getting stuck in them. I was like, they're saying this. I was like, I'm going to reply back and saying that I'm a scam because I'm taking all the homes off the market. And I was really getting into it, replying. I was like, you are wasting so much time. And someone saying about how the refinance or using the debt is a scam. And I'm like, do you know what? I don't need to sit and explain it to you, because if you're not interested enough to want to understand why I'm saying what I'm saying, because I will explain anything to anybody. But if you're going to come across in a way of that I'm wrong and I'm stupid, you do that, fine, be my guest, because it's not impacting my life. And I think if there was someone genuinely who had a big platform who was trying to trash talk me in public on social media, they wouldn't. My name is clean. I'm clean with what I do. It's very public what I do and the valuations that I'm getting. So at the end of the day, I just kind of ignore them. And I think that you have to, because they're not particularly people like that aren't really worth your time and your energy. We've got enough stress as it is. So yeah, I just kind of let it happen. I think.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, and I think your attitude
The
to
only
it
other
is
thing
so
is
good.
Yeah, the only other thing is where obviously, look, I'm now in the building trade, I'm in construction, so a lot of the time I'll post things on my stories within projects. Now, occasionally you'll get a builder or someone in the trade and comment, I would do this way, I would use moisture boards, and you have to sit back, and these people you do need to reply to, because there's a million different ways to do anything and everything, but as long as the end goal works, that's how you've got there. So I'll have to respond to things like, oh, well, we tank instead, which for us we feel has a better benefit. And, there's things like that, and I think particularly as a woman, when you get some man who's in the trade and he's trying to dumb you down for what you're doing, those people, yes, I would respond back to, because I think there is that, it is still a male-dominated industry, it does still have that. So you do, in some cases, have to respond, have to kind of back yourself, where it is actually relevant to what you're talking about.
No, absolutely. No, I think that was perfectly said. I love that. And as people grow, I want them to really hear that, which is just have positive vibes only. Positive vibes, and only focus on the bits that really uplift you. So I think that's great. And then the final thing I just want to touch on, because we spoke about it just off the podcast, so just before we wrap up with our property disaster, was we literally said off the podcast, and I said, let's leave it for the podcast because I think it's important to talk about, was we both came on here and we both said to each other, gosh, there's a lot going on at the moment, isn't there? And we were talking about this idea of overwhelm, because for both of us, there's so much going on. Of course, I've got the retreat, I've got my personal brand, I'm doing a refurb and a refinance on one of my flats. I've got some personal stuff going on. I do Star Collective, I do Dorset Property Network, I've got all my social media. Like I wrote down the other day all the things that I do, and it's quite frankly insane. It really is. And there comes a point, doesn't there, where you just go, okay, this is too much. This is a lot. It is a lot. And sometimes you think to yourself, right, how am I gonna go forward with this? What's sustainable, as it were? So, and you were touching on the fact, you were like, yeah, do you know what, I hear you, I'm really overwhelmed at the moment too. And I think what's so important is to say to listeners who listen to this is, if you're listening to this thinking, oh, these girls are bossing it, how do they do everything that they do in a day? I get those messages all the time. They're like, Athena, you're bossing it, you're doing this, you're doing this. I'm like, yeah, I'm also very tired. I'm also got a lot on my plate. I'm also thinking about, is this sustainable? Like, I've always kept this podcast so real and so raw with all of the listeners because it's so important. And we are not superhuman. Like, we're not superhuman. We're not got it all figured out. There's a lot that also happens day to day in our personal lives. And I think that's so important to say on this podcast, to make other people listening to it feel, oh, thank goodness it's not just me. I'm telling you in your ears right now, it is not just you. So please don't feel that way. So Adriana, you were kind of saying you feel quite a similar way as well, don't you, in terms of just overwhelm?
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what it is? So I think it's really funny how everything always happens. I think everything's really, really cyclical. So you'll be where you're at. You might be at a place where things are going really bad. There's everything tends to happen at one time where things go wrong. You've then got to deal with all that at one point. That can be really overwhelming. But I think once you kind of work and push through that, you then move to the stage where everything goes really right, and then it all kind of goes full circle. So you've got to, especially, I think it does in everyone's life, but particularly as us as entrepreneurs and in the trade that we're in, you do have to understand that it's not always going to be perfect. And yes, look, on social media, everything looks like it is always good, because overall, exactly as I said before, the good outweighs it. Things are good and they're moving in the direction, but that doesn't mean to say that what we do is easy and that it's happening easily. I mean, I'm running 7 different development sites at the minute. That is not easy. There is a lot going on, but on top of that, I'm still out meeting new clients and I'm sourcing new developments, and I've got my own projects going on, and I've got refinances that need to trigger at certain points, and planning applications in, and then everybody wants to speak to me all the time, and messages on social media that I want to be able to help people there with, and raising finance and podcasting and events and traveling to London all the time. So there's a million trillion things on my plate, and it can be really hard at times, and it can be stressful. And I think it's very easy to want to pull yourself in all these different directions and always want to give it everything 1,000,000%. And I think sometimes once you've found that, you've got your feet, now I know where I stand and what I do. So I'm still getting a million different opportunities thrown at me, people wanting to do all these different collaborations and things like that, and it all sounds amazing. But ultimately, you've got to know what your own boundaries are to make sure that none of the other million amazing things you've got going on are then going to suffer at the cost of chasing a new opportunity. So yeah, definitely it's overwhelming and it is difficult, and it goes in phases of you're on track with everything and then you feel like, oh my God, there's a trillion tasks all at the same deadline. And sometimes that can happen day to day. Sometimes it can be a couple of weeks at a time. Sometimes it can be over a month. It does all change, but yes, it is absolutely stressful. It is hard, but you do just have to sort of. It's worth it, exactly. It's worth it, absolutely. You have to love. We have to love what we do, and I think that's the other reason when people ask us, "How do you do it?" Because I love it. I absolutely love what I've created, what I do. And the bigger picture of it is...
Somebody said this to me the other day, because they were saying to me, you're constantly busy, you constantly look stressed, you constantly got a million things on your plate. Are you happy? Do you enjoy it? I'm like, yeah, I love it. Like, I love the buzz. I love what I do. I'm good at what I do as well. Like, and it's really weird because you can have both at the same time. You can have an overwhelming week where you also can sell out your Girls in Property retreat. You can gain sponsorship for your retreat. You can take on board two new mentees. You can have a really positive conversation with a new investor that you onboard. You can have all of these wins that happen for you in the week. Like, I could list for you all the positive things that have recently happened to me that are really taking off with my business, and it's exploding in a really positive way. But that's also okay to say all those fantastic things are happening to me, but also I've also got a lot on my plate day to day, and therefore it's also overwhelming. So it's a really interesting, I almost want to get a psychologist on the podcast to talk about this, because it's a really interesting combination of succeeding, doing really well, being really proud of yourself, but also saying, okay, whilst all of this is fantastic and I'm so proud and it's so incredible, I also have to do everything else behind the scenes. There's a lot of things going on. So I don't know, it's like, as Stephen Bartlett was saying on his thing, about having buckets and about understanding those and offloading and becoming the best expert recruiter. Like, people say to me all the time, they're like, Athena, you might just need to hire someone to take the admin off your plate, because let's face it, admin is huge with these things. So it's just a really interesting conversation. So I just always want to make sure that when we're speaking for listeners who message me and say, I'm feeling really rubbish this week, I'm really, really overwhelmed this week, we feel you guys and girls. Like, we're not out here saying that we have it all figured out.
And I think one more thing to sort of and I think one more thing that I would add to that is the same thing I heard it this morning as well, and it really resonated, that overwhelming doesn't actually have to mean that things are bad. People see overwhelming and they think meltdown, distraught. It's not the case. It's just that there is a lot going on and you have to find time to compartmentalize and prioritize different things. And secondary to that, I think having that element of anxiety and, that, I think it keeps you safe, because it makes sure that you are very meticulous. I think when you're in that, if everything was really, really good all the time, you would become very much more lax. You would think everything's going to be perfect, everything's going to work. Having those anxieties and those worries, make sure that before they can actually come true, you've put in protections to make sure that everything is done right. You have followed all of the steps, because you've got that thing in the back of your head of, oh, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. And I think that's really, really important to then growing and scaling a business, is keeping that sense of ego down and that level of anxiety. It is good to be there. So yeah, that's just kind of the final point that I would say on that as well. Don't be scared of it.
I think that's perfect. And just to finalize this also, the week that I had my little dog Bertie come to stay babysitting, I recommend it for anyone who's ever feeling overwhelmed or stressed. Dogs are an absolute dopamine hit of wonder and calmness. And my God, we're now basically decided we are going to be getting a dog. Well, we knew anyway, but this has just solidified the fact it's just solidified the fact we're definitely getting a dog. So now we're just working towards it, because I think if you can introduce things that get you outside, get you moving, get you happy, like just introducing those things, I think that could really transform. Absolutely. So Adriana, just to finish off the podcast, in usual traditional style, would you like to share with us a really sort of interesting property mishap, property disaster that maybe happened to you recently or in the past? Just because it's a really great way of just keeping it really real with the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is one that kind of sticks out, but I have shared it a few times. That it was kind of going into a deal and, not fully looking into what I was going into, and it did cost me. I have already kind of touched on that before, so I will try and go for something different. Does slightly have a good spin on the end of it, I guess, but essentially we were looking at a project. It was for a client, and the plan was to convert it into a 10-bedroom HMO. Now, obviously, to do that, it requires going through planning, but it was auction, which then meant, how do you protect against this? So took a lot of negotiating and, putting the clauses in place that said essentially to the auction house, if we don't get planning, I want you to refund the auction fee, because that's £6,000 of the client's money, but they're not going to see a reward. This went on for months and months and months, and everybody was getting stressed, and we were having difficulty with lenders, because lenders didn't want to put the money in the bank because the planning wasn't there, and then they wanted to complete, and it was a very, very chaotic time. And anyway, ended up going to appeal. We went to the appeal, and we did unfortunately get rejected. But look, so there had been money spent there. There'd been money spent on plans. There'd been money spent with brokers and lenders and things like that. But unfortunately, that sale, it couldn't go through. And the client did actually end up buying it because they were just in love with the property, and they've gone down the serviced accommodation route. But the returns that we had expected it to bring weren't actually there, which is a shame. It was going to be a good project to work and things like that. And I guess the kind of moral of that lesson learned was, what I did do on the front end was I put the precaution in there that said, if we don't get planning, at least we get the auction fee refunded, which is a significant amount. And, it's one of them that you sometimes you do have to spend and not get a reward to pursue a route that that can have the value. So I guess that was one. Not sure how much of a big scare it was, but it was, it teaches you, it reminds you.
Absolutely. And you know what? People always say they will always have these certain properties or certain projects that teach them all the lessons. And this sounds like one of those. And I always feel that it's never a bad thing to say that something didn't go right or didn't go to plan, as long as you learnt from it and you acted differently the next time and didn't just repeat the same mistake, which is what you clearly learnt, and clearly therefore put the caveats in place for the auction fee. So fabulous. Brilliant.
Exactly.
And then if people wanted to then find you, which I'm sure they're going to want to do, and have even more DMs that you even do at the moment, and have the wonders of that, where can people find you?
I would say the best place to sort of find me and do initial outreach is my social media, which is just my name, Adriana Cafasso. I am verified on there, so you will know which account it actually is. That's probably the best way to get in touch, depending which route you want to go down. So we work a lot with investors in different ways, be it if you are actually looking to invest in the north, just send us a message. We'll basically send a form, gather some information about you, and then get a call booked, walk you through who we are and what we do. Or if you're looking to kind of work with us as fixed return, we also bring clients on to work with us on different projects as well. So social media, I would say Instagram is the best place to sort of reach me initially and see a lot of where I am and what I'm doing as well.
Perfect. And if you want to find me, I'm Athena Dobson_official. Come and say hello. We are Girls in Property on Instagram, girlsinpropertypod@gmail.com. And as you guys know, the Girls in Property retreat is sold out. So if you are interested in trying to grab a ticket, just DM me the word waitlist. And what I'll do is I'll pop you on the waitlist and let you know about any others coming up. But look forward to seeing so many of you there. I've obviously been DMing you for so long, and to actually see you in person will be fantastic. So look forward to seeing you all in April. Thank you so much, Adriana, for coming on. Really appreciate it. You've been fabulous, and just another way of showing how incredible women are in this sector, and I can't wait to see more of what you do. I will definitely be keeping a close eye. It's brilliant.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it as well.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful Monday. Take care. Bye.